Welcome to a review of Dune Part 2. I'm Dylan Barry on the Dylan Barry Network. Thanks so much for tuning into this review. Massive, massive blockbuster hit movie Dune Part 2 is out, and it is one of those movies that when you go see it, you can't help but to think about it. As far as myself, I had to go pick up a six pack on the way home to cool off. Uh, it's a masterpiece of a movie, enough to fire up the DBN engines. To call a good friend, Zach, who's going to join us. Zach, welcome to the show, welcome to
Thank
the
you so much.
review.
Happy to be here.
Zach, you've been on this network many a times to talk some great movies that have come out in the last couple of years, and
Yeah,
we're going to get right into Dune Part Two. Um, I want to know first thoughts, I guess, how you're feeling because it hit me like a freight train, and I and I,
yeah,
I,
no.
I know movies like this. I feel like we're all on the same page usually about these things, but where are you at?
The credits rolled on this one, and my first thought was 10 out of 10,
Yeah,
and that's not something that I throw around a lot. I'm a big, even my favorite movies, those are 9 out of 10. There's always room for improvement. There's nothing quite perfect. I'm not going to say that Dune Part Two is perfect. Everything must have its flaws, but this was about as close to just a perfect cinematic theater experience that I can remember for a long time. I was trying to compare the feeling walking out of this showing to anything I've seen recently, and I have a really hard time
yeah.
kind of drawing comparisons with anything that's kind of created that sense of like scale and depth of emotion and just that feeling of being completely transported. It's just so rare to get that. It feels like overhyping, but
No, yeah.
you feel like this is the appropriate movie to be like this was fucking amazing.
Dude, it feels like overhyping. On one side, I'm like, man, this is just, this is a Hollywood blockbuster. It's got every star in the book in it. It's this has already been done before. It's just a remake. But then the other side of me is like, dude, I think movies like this are reasons why I love movies, and the reasons why I'm like, like I'm into movies because it did everything a movie can do, and could do, and did more than that. And like, honestly, yeah, I am now overhyping it, but it was just such a masterpiece of sound, of sight, of performance, of story,
Mm-hmm.
of just like incredible scenes of love and incredible scenes of violence and rage, to just beautiful settings. Like, I don't know, like, so talking about going into the movie, I actually wasn't super wasn't crazy about Dune 1. I thought it was cool. I thought, I was like, all right, let's go to this world. And now I look at Dune 1 as Fellowship of the Ring, like,
Mm.
where like you kind of go back, and it's a setup movie, but then you go and you watch it and you're like, dude, that's a great movie. That's at least my journey with it. What was your take going into Dune? What was your relationship with the material?
Right. Going to Doom Part One, I was really excited because I feel like seeing that first trailer for Dune Part One um was already evoking those emotions that I just talked about, that like feeling of just huge epic
Yeah,
movie making on the highest, storytelling on the highest possible scale.
yeah,
But I didn't really know much about Dune the story going into that. I knew how influential it was to properties that I love, like
so okay.
Star Wars. George Lucas talked about how much inspiration from that world he took from Dune. So I knew that it was kind of this formative story that impacted a lot, but the actual story itself I didn't know anything about. I knew there were worms, and I knew I'd seen clips from the old David Lynch movie, and so it
Right.
just seemed very weird and kind of like this off kilter
Yeah.
sci-fi. But going into that movie, I really loved it. I think I've been comparing mentally Dune Part One to Across the Spider Verse for myself recently. A
Nice.
movie that I really loved and think there's so much good with it, um, but wasn't really to like draw able to draw a full conclusion on it until you see kind of how that story wraps up.
Correct.
Um,
Yes.
and the thing about Dune was the more I watched it, the more I really loved it because I tried to go in fairly blind. I got like a little bit of the lore because this world is so huge, and
Yeah.
we're looking. These two movies take place in the span of a year in a story that has like 35,000 years of history or something
Yeah.
crazy like
Yeah.
that. So watching the movie several times since part one first came out, I grew to love it more and more. And as we approached the release of Dune 2 and I started to see a lot of the hype for it, I really tried to keep myself apart from that and try to keep my expectations
Yeah.
fairly grounded until it was the day of and I was really, really pumped up.
Yeah.
Uh, and so after part one finished, I was invested. And I was like, oh, I cannot wait 2 years to find out how the story ends. So I went and immediately read the book. So I went into Dune Part Two like with expectations about okay, well, we'll see how they do this part, and we'll see how they do this, and how are you going to film that? Um, and it completely surpassed all my expectations for my mental picture of what that part of the story was, which I think is so hard for books to do.
Yeah.
That I mean, halfway through that movie, like my jaw was just on the floor, and I couldn't believe how much fun I was having watching it. And I was like, I think they're really going to stick the landing here.
Yeah.
And by the time the credits roll, I was just absolutely blown away.
Yeah. And like, I mean, we've been like lucky enough to know that this material, whether it is, famous, yeah, as a book and even as a movie, like that movie, people know about Dune, the movie, that whatever. But the fact that it was in the hands of Denis Villeneuve, the great French director who has, I know for
An
you,
auteur, one might say.
really like Blade Runner 2049 is one of your favorite movies, and like you rave about that. But even his smaller, more intimate, like he can do a movie like Dune, but he could do a movie like Prisoners, where like it's just about two little girls being kidnapped, or he can do a movie about the cartel with Sicario,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's like this was a great director, and now he's in a giant blockbuster genre movie, and he didn't disappoint. I don't know where you want to start, but I think for me, like the performances, like stood out a lot. Of course, the
Yeah.
visuals, the sound, we'll get into all that, but the performances I want to talk about specifically because, man, Timothy Chalamet is a blockbuster titan.
I
Like I
I
saw
feel
I saw
really
Wonka and I thought that was fun and I thought, hey, yeah, this is fine, this is cool. But you see Dune and it's not just reserved, moody Timothy. He yells, he gets angry, and then the choreography of the fight scenes that they're not making quick
yes.
cuts, that he had to commit to the stunt acting there.
Specifically that final fight with Fade Routha.
Yeah,
Already the emotions but are swirling around you, but when you notice how quick and precise the choreography is between Austin Butler and
yeah,
Timothy Chalamet, like I was really, really impressed by just the athleticism
yeah,
from that fight scene. And I think you hit the nail on the head that Timothy Chalamet really cements himself as the guy here. I mean, he's clearly had the acting chop. Going into this film, I think when I was watching part one, I think he was a really good Paul Atreides, but when I rewatched Dune after reading the book and knowing where they needed Paul as a character to go, I wasn't sure that Timothy Chalamet was going to be able to sell that,
mm,
powerful religious figure,
yeah,
icon
yeah,
character. And to just do it within the span of this movie, I mean, from where he is when the film picks up, which is really just like 5 minutes after the end of the first one,
yeah,
to the scene where he goes to kind of like the conclave in this on the southern continent and claims that power for himself and is yelling to the Fremen and whipping everybody up into this frenzy. That was insane. That
yeah.
performance was absolutely out of this world.
Yeah, it's he was so good, and like this can easily, like, I mean, it is a great role, but like usually, I mean, when you think about, like we've talked about before, like Harry Potter is a protagonist who really is kind of just learning about the world, and we see that here too with Paul. He's also learning about what he's our portal into Dune. He's wondering, well, what's it like on this planet? What's it like in this kingdom, in this galaxy, all that stuff, but then he also now has to take it on. And like yeah, I don't know, just through and through, Chalamet carried it. Like, and I was just lost. Like that wasn't chat. Like that was Paul Atreides. Like that's
Absolutely.
crazy.
And that's the best compliment you can give, really, once you stop seeing the actor. And it's one of those movies where it could get in the way if the
Totally.
performances aren't great, because
Yeah.
every time a new character pops up, you're like, oh my God, this person.
Yeah.
I think the only person that really happened to me with this movie was the Anya Taylor Joy cameo.
Right. True.
Who perfectly cast for that character.
Yeah.
That
And we
what
will
they
see.
did
We'll
was
hopefully see more of that, down the road.
that was for my money, one of the better changes they made from the book, because in the book that character Alia is like alive throughout this part of the story, is like this hyper intelligent 2 year old, and it's very unsettling. I like how they switched that up to just sort of have her communicating with the Lady Jessica and
Yeah.
Anya Taylor Joy. Perfect cast for a grown up Alia.
Yeah.
Just a funny one of those things, one of the very few things that like snapped me out of the illusion of the movie for a bit when I was like, Anya Taylor Joy, what are you doing here? But
Yeah.
I guess that's suffering from success when so many incredibly famous, talented actors want to be in your movie. That
Yeah. And
that's
dude,
tough.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I was an Austin Butler maybe troll, if you will, after the whole
And now,
Elvis voice thing. But now, dude, Austin Butler. I mean, look, Austin Butler was incredible. All right, Fade
just
Rotha.
bone chilling.
Oh my gosh! Like I think even then that character was so awesome too because like he wasn't full of big speeches and like terrifying like I'll slowly kill you. It was like I'm testing out these blades. I'm gonna wipe
Mm-hmm.
out this room. You know, and then he gets that anger that this is the last of the House of Atreides, and we get to see their planet, and like him just tear it up. Like Austin
Yeah,
Butler
his
killed it.
he brought this sense of like barely restrained, like
Yeah,
kinetic violence at
animal.
all time. It
Yeah,
always felt like he could just explode. And it,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying this was on the level of like Heath Ledger's Joker, but I feel
Mm,
that to me was kind of the what it harkened back to, no pun
wow.
intended,
Yeah. Wow.
of
Wow. Nice.
just the way that a character would come on screen and just the magnetism of that villain and how they kind of sucked in all the energy in the
Yeah.
room to them whenever they were on.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Definitely. Yeah. Like
it's
to be the one that's like I'm like, dude, Dave Bautista's already this vicious warrior. Like you have to really make me believe that this guy's gonna one up Dave Bautista, and yeah, he did.
immediately.
Crazy.
That was incredible.
Yeah, I thought he was great. What a great character, great villain leads to an all time fight. Josh Brolin does come back here, and you get that "for my Duke" and "for my friends" line.
Ooh.
That's all you need right there.
Yes.
That's better than a cup of coffee in the morning. You can throw that clip on. Like I could not believe yeah, just how epic. And like that is like one of many epic moments like that in this movie.
The
Like there are
last
so
30
many.
minutes of the way that movie came together
Yeah,
and like how so many arcs get tied up in a lot of times like just a single line like that
yeah,
of for my Duke.
yeah.
It makes these two movies a like fit together so seamlessly because I watched part one in the morning and then went to see
Oh,
part two
nice.
like an hour later. Great experience, highly recommend it. But it is 6 hours of Dune, so by the end of the day,
Yeah, it's a
you're
lot.
exhausted and
Yeah,
you're
it's a
you're very
lot.
upset that you're stuck on planet Earth. Um, but and then when Paul's in that scene, when he silences the Bene Gesserit mother in the way that she silenced him in the first movie, this the script I feel like does such a good job not getting bogged down in explaining stuff to the audience.
Yeah,
It does a great job with, like you said, sound and visuals, communicating everything
yeah,
happening without these big like long bits of exposition.
yeah,
Expect you to be smart enough to keep up, and I think that does so much for the pacing of this movie.
yeah.
While we're talking about performances, I thought Zendaya, Shawnee
Of
was
course, of
fantastic.
course. Yeah,
Um,
I heard that's a little bit of a stray away from the book. That she maybe isn't the maybe face of the rebellion, you could almost say, or like just the one who stands up against everyone, who ultimately is the wedge in what makes this like movie extra complicated, the story extra
right.
complicated, and brings it into like real world issues of like prophets and religion and how it's used over people and like being someone who maybe sees outside of that, but like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and also like you get to see them fall in love the first hour or so of this movie,
And it's
and
convincing. It's a sell. I think sometimes it's hard to not see Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya falling in love on the sand. Like it could have
right,
easily fallen into that, and it was never that for me. It always felt like Paul and Shawnee,
yeah,
kind of discovering this shared worldview.
yeah,
But like you mentioned, that was probably the biggest thematic change. Where in the books, Shawnee sticks by Paul
yeah,
through thick and thin, and even at the end, she's encouraging him, "Hey, I think you need to set up this marriage with Princess Irulan so we can secure the throne." To which Paul's like, "I'll do that, but just know that forever, you're my wife, or we're gonna get through it." So Paul kind
mhm,
of gets to have his cake and eat it too.
yeah,
And I saw an interview with Denis Villeneuve where he was talking about how Frank Herbert's second book, Dune Messiah, he really wrote as a reaction to what he felt was kind of some misunderstanding
Huh.
about what he was trying to do with Paul.
Yeah.
Where it seems like when Dune first came out, people really saw Paul as this heroic figure. Hey, look, the good guys won, and where Frank Herbert was like, no, that was not the message I was trying to send.
Huh.
So Denis Villeneuve said he wanted to bring a little bit of that tone into the ending of this
Yeah.
one, so that get the message across effectively. And I think Shawnee ultimately leaving Paul there and him sort of being more isolated and kind of embracing this more villain role helped communicate that better than maybe it did in the book.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, or that like he felt like he needed to use Messiah early, like you know what I mean, like in maybe the hopes that it, or in the thought that it wouldn't come out, that we might not get a third movie
Maybe.
based off. Because I saw a couple interviews too. He was at junkets, and two different interviewers that I saw were like pressing him on like, all right, so when's the third one come? When's the third one? Like, are you gonna make a third one? And he seemed very much like, dude, I'm just going one movie at a time. I've always been my whole career one movie at a time. He's like, of course I'd love to do Messiah, but like I'm still in this one right now, and I'm still feeling this one out. And I don't know if that's film business talk, that it's like, we got to see how the movie does, because it did 82, 85 million domestically opening weekend, which perspective, that's what Oppenheimer did opening weekend, but that's
Wow.
when Oppenheimer came out the same weekend as Barbie, which did 125 million opening weekend. So it's great for March, and it's really good for right now, the start of the summer year. And I bet you globally it'll end up being $1 billion movie. But it is funny that Denis felt like, oh, we should use that part in case we don't. We should be able to justify and show that, like, this guy's
Right.
not a hero. He might not be a hero. Like, we're gonna give a different perspective. That's like, oh no, he's thrown away like the things that he promised to the Fremen, but they all believe him as
Right.
this savior, and it's like, oh,
Oof.
crazy.
Goosebumps. I mean, it really gives me Anakin Skywalker vibes in
Of
a lot of
course,
ways.
yeah, yeah,
And I think since I was a kid, I don't know if there's been that character that like you respect what they're doing and you can see yourself in them, and then they start going down this dark path and you're like, oh no, this is.
yeah,
And even in each of those characters doing it in the pursuit of something that they think is noble. Paul is telling himself that, oh, we're going to liberate the planet for the Fremen. We're going to turn this into a paradise. Do I
yeah,
get
of
a little revenge along the way? Hopefully.
course,
And then by the end of the movie, he's like, oh, okay, let's just go ahead and start this universe-wide genocide because I'm the emperor now and you all messed with the wrong guy.
yeah.
Oh, Paul, my baby, that was not the move.
Mm. Yeah,
But
I had heard one guy say too. Someone, Dan Merle, he reviews movies on YouTube. He's really great. He was talking that he said that in the book too. So the water they drink, that it's explained more in the book that really does just shut off. Like that is like the end of the line for Paul, and now he really becomes this new being almost.
right,
And
yeah, from
so
what I
and
remember,
that wasn't clearly like, oh no, there was an actual physical change that happened to him when he goes through that.
and I think the way that they try to do that in the story is kind of with that classic like hero's journey, apparent
Sure.
death
Yeah.
moment where it's like, oh, he's not quite dead, but he's almost dead and coming back to life. The idea is that you've kind of assimilated all the knowledge and skills you need to be this fully formed person who can finish
Yeah.
your quest.
Yeah.
And in Dune is an interesting book from a literary perspective. It's written in third person omniscient, which is really unusual.
Yeah.
Where within a single scene, you're kind of popping into the heads of everybody.
Wow. Dude, that's
And Paul is
literally like the genre that your English teacher's like, yeah, we're actually not even going to teach that one because it
right.
doesn't even
Like,
happen ever.
you're like that in second person. Don't
Yeah.
worry about that.
Yeah, you don't even need
Um,
to. Yeah.
in the book, though, you do follow Paul for a good chunk of the book, and then as soon as he drinks that water of life, if I remember correctly, you kind of stop going into his head after
Huh.
that. You
Whoa.
don't really get a peek in on exactly what his thinking and like his train of thought. You pretty much only see him in the world through the eyes of the people around him.
Wild.
Which
Wild.
is kind of the only way you can do it because if you're Paul and you're experiencing every possible future at
Yeah.
every moment, there's really no way to convey that effectively, I don't think. But I mean, that really is what happens. He drinks that, and then he's no longer Paul Atreides. He's Lisan
Mm.
Al Gaib,
Yeah.
Muad'Dib, and is off to do what he does.
Yeah, they could like it's this movie did another, like we talked about these big scenes earlier, but to talk about some specifics, like to be riding a sandworm should be really cheesy and cartoonish and terrible, but it is in fact the most epic thing we have ever seen with our own eyes. Like it was the most badass, like awesome,
Visceral,
like it was, you were there and it was just such this triumphant moment after all these, trials and whatnot. And then yeah, when all the worms come in through the cloud of,
ooh,
like, dude, that should look terrible. Like that should look like the Meg,
it
like
should
the,
be so goofy.
yeah, that should be a Jason Statham movie. But in fact, but it's not. It was a really well done. And look, I actually haven't seen the Meg, but it was
No
like,
disrespect
no
to the Meg and
disrespect.
the
I don't
Meg
want to
fans out
disrespect the
there.
Meg, but no, dude, it should have been so cheesy, but it was badass.
And that's why I feel like I've had a hard time explaining this movie, like why like my family needs to go see this movie and trying to think about it critically because I can't get past just the like, oh my God, that was so cool feeling of it, which usually wears off by the time I leave the theater and I can like think about what I saw. And I haven't had that at all. Like
Yeah,
I left the theater and me and Mike and Kat went and got in and out next door and just sat outside and like watched the sun go down and we're like,
dude.
what did we just witness?
It's like, why are we on this planet? Like, it really felt like an Avatar situation where you're on a different planet, dude. This is like, we're here, and like, it's so immersive and unlike anything we've seen before. Because, like, yeah, we've seen Tatooine, we've seen dirt planets and whatnot, but to see it go this big
Yeah,
and to
nothing
be
just
this
felt like it
awesome,
had that much character. And I can't stand desert planets. I live in the desert. I don't want
right?
to see stuff
Right.
on Tatooine anymore. I don't like that. And
Yeah,
yet Arrakis felt like this cool, like mystical,
yeah,
incredible, not a vacation destination by any means, but this place that
yeah,
they're just so ripe with adventure.
yeah.
And I love those kind of settings.
Yeah, and like I've heard some critics like talk about like CGI used in the dark and like daytime, to use special effects during the daytime is such a harder challenge because everything is, it's bright, it's on display,
Right.
so it just speaks to like, I don't know, the craft of this movie and just how great it
Yeah,
is.
explain that to me, Dylan. How this movie they made for like 80 to 90 million dollars, and there are these other movies that are twice that budget
Right,
that just look terrible. I
right.
mean, is that taking the time to perfect the visual effects shots? How do you, because this movie is stunningly beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. This movie, it's like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know, man. It's such a weird challenge, but you also just always have to have like, a great story. Like a great story is all that matters, and great characters, and all these other dumb movies, like they're just like, let's just throw in these basic things and then just have some
Mm-hmm.
cool explosions, and people will love that. But if you take us to a new planet and you challenge your audience to like, these are going to be some weird names, and they're going to be on some weird named planets, but follow along, follow along. That's kind of how I did feel about the first one. Is I was like, man, this was really good at giving me the exposition slowly but surely, and it kind of just like by the end of it, I really did feel like, oh man, I felt like we just created this big world. But I definitely felt wanting more, and this was the more we got, and I can't complain.
No, it really does feel hard to compare to anything since I've seen since it was like my earliest memories in my life were like watching Star Wars.
Yeah,
So I don't remember what it was like to see those movies for the first time,
yeah,
but it had that similar feeling of just like scope and scale and just like raw adventure action
yeah,
storytelling that I love. That's what I come to the movies for, and it delivered. You know, you were talking about how it communicated like this great sense of character across a really a big cast. Um, and I think that's another example of a way that this version of Dune elevates certain aspects of the book. So
mm,
I think, you know, a complaint I hear about the book, the characters are kind of wooden.
mm,
Um, I can see that. You know, Dune the story, the book itself has almost none of these big action sequences that are in Dune Part Two. Frank Herbert's not a guy who wanted to write a lot of action. The book itself is a lot more about the ecology of the planet
mm,
and how, you know, humans impact on ecology kind of impacts our society. So the themes are a little different. I mean, obviously Paul and the cautionary tales about messiahs and prophets is all still front and center.
yeah,
But the way that Denis Villeneuve kind of honed in on certain characters that he wanted to take to the next level and also make this a big spectacle action film that didn't lose too much of the original.
yeah,
I think it's really hard to take an adaptation and make it better than the original.
Yeah.
Um, we can all argue whether this is better than the book. For me, these two stories are a more enjoyable way to consume the story than the novel is, which
Yeah.
is so rare to me.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the and like it even balances like obviously it's yeah this big warning sign about prophets and about religion and like yeah its uses and whatnot, and you get someone like Stilgar who I think plays a really funny role of like he's well versed in this, so he knows the trials or the things that we have to test to make sure this guy's for real. And then even when Paul's like it's not me, like Stilgar's like this guy's so
That's
humble.
exactly
He's
what
saying,
Nissan really would say.
that's exactly what he would say. And it's this perfect like comedic thing, but it's also like, yeah, that's kind of how the followers of messiahs and you know old books and whatnot, old prophecies. That's how they
Well,
believe is like, oh
imagine
wow, this
that
is how it goes.
if you're Stilgar and you've had these prophecies sitting in front of you your whole life, and then all of a sudden this
Yeah,
kid shows up and starts following them to a T, you
yeah,
would be like, "Oh my God, Nissan Al Gaib."
yeah,
He Stilgar and Javier Bardem was the unexpected
yeah,
comedy in this movie that I didn't see, and I never felt like he was hamming it up. It all felt very
yeah,
in line with what it should be. But yeah, it was a crack up every time he was
yeah.
gassing up Paul. I was like that. Stilgar is the hype man we all wish we had in our life.
Yeah, it's good stuff. What do you I guess do you have any other final thoughts on Dune before we talk about maybe what else we hope for?
Oh, it's hard to. I still my feelings for Dune kind of are bigger than words right now.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's all I've
cool.
been able to think about for 2 days, and I will
Yeah,
just like watch some lore videos on YouTube to like get another hit of it. But
yeah,
I it's funny to me, like you said, you're like, oh, this made like 85 million first weekend. That's great, especially for a weird story,
right. This is
in
sci-fi.
in
Yeah,
sci-fi. But to just I don't know, to just get such a high quality franchise film like that, like even if they don't ever make another one,
right.
like I just feel so lucky that we
True.
have these two incredibly well made movies, and
Yeah.
I know I'm going to be watching these for a long, long time. So I'm just happy to be alive when these movies come out. It feels good.
Yeah, dude, and we're gonna get to see more and more from Denis. Like that's pretty cool. And I
A
bet you.
quick side note to that, I
Well,
just saw him. I think somebody had asked him if he's a fan of Batman Beyond, and he was like, "Oh, are you kidding me? Like cyberpunk Batman? Like what gets cooler than that?" I was
whoa,
like, "Please, brother, please, I'm telling you."
dang.
It's like
Do you imagine? I heard Batman Beyond should get Across the Spider Verse treatment. That
so.
yeah, I've seen
Did
like
you
artwork on like Instagram or something.
Yeah, so that's actually real artwork that I guess the creators before they got the Spider-Verse gig had pitched to Warner Brothers or
Oh
whoever
wow,
owns DC. And so
yeah.
that was real like Batman Beyond in the Spider-Verse style concept art that they had made, which just sounds amazing to me. That gets
Um,
me so excited.
Imagine if they had like a Batverse thing. Like, actually, can we just swap out like Spider Man for Bruce Wayne and like Peter Parker? Like, can we just swap those out? Like, I think it'll work still. It's like
It'd be
it's like
so good.
wait, dead parents or dead? Yeah, wait, this all works. Yeah, we could
Future
just
canon events.
yeah, we can do it. Oh, Marvel's doing a universe thing too. It's okay. We'll just let it ride.
No one's gonna complain.
Yeah, dude. What do you hope for with Dune 3? Like, do you hope? I mean, it's been a couple years since we've gotten these past two, and Dune Messiah, obviously, like Denis is familiar with the source material. He's in no rush. Well, from what I heard, he's waiting for a good script. It's gotta make sense, which means they could go a million different ways with it.
Yeah, I haven't read all of Dune Messiah. I read about half of it. It's a very, very different book. It's, from what I read, it's very much Paul being like, "Oh, so what have I done?"
Yeah,
Um, I would like to see if they make a third one to round out a trilogy, and to see them play with the timeline a little bit. 'Cause I think Messiah is 12 years after Dune, and it seems like it skips the really exciting actiony part of like the galaxy-wide war
yeah,
that Paul starts. Um, I would like to see then you take a little creative liberty with it,
yeah,
and do some interesting. But a big part of that book too is Paul navigating his relationship with being married to Princess Irulan and also trying to be loyal to Shani. With kind of the change you make at the end of this movie, if Shani's not in that creates a whole another cascade of differences. So I have no idea. But if he thinks he's got a good one to tell and he wants to do another movie, I'm so 100% down. on the other hand, if I think it's going to be really hard to top Dune Part Two for a
Yeah.
long time. So
Yeah. He should take his time. He should, yeah, make it special. Like it's a great team. It seems like. I mean, this is also like the future of Hollywood too. When we think about this, these like young stars of like Zendaya and Austin Butler, and obviously he's gone now. But even like Florence Pugh didn't really get to do anything in this movie. But to get to use Florence Pugh in the next one, to even bring in more people from, make the cast even bigger. This is one of those things where it's like, dang, it's kind of like White Lotus. Like, man, who are they going to sign in the offseason
yeah.
for the next one? And like, how are they going to keep building this thing out? Because we're all on board, and we can't wait.
Well,
for
I'm
the next.
curious too because I think there have been talks about doing like an HBO Max Bene Gesserit show.
Right.
And when they announced that after the first one, it was like, hey, let's pump our brakes. I Part of me would be really excited to get some expanded universe stuff from
Yeah.
that kind of uses these movies as launch points to go
Yeah.
and tell some other cool stories in the Dune world. I also don't want anything to taint like how kind of perfect these
Yeah.
movies are together.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's got to be done with a lot of love and care, and you hope some direction from the people who helped make this movie. But honestly, if they never touch it again and just leave this as this amazing thing, I'm totally fine.
Yep, that's I'm in agreement with that. I think that's it's a good movie. Well, hey Zach, thanks so much for coming on, dude. This was a once in a lifetime type movie. I'm glad we've gotten to be around for a lot of cool cinematic moments in history, whether it's and this is what we lived through, but the Harry Potter series all coming out one at a time was super exciting. The Avengers, the MCU, being ready for those month after month.
Yep.
Yeah, we were the first part two. Like we're the part
The
two
part two
generation.
generation.
We're the part two generation. And so we've gotten to see some epic movies, and some part twos are better than others, and this one was one of the best. If we did a top list of best part two movies, it would be that'd be a good one.
Part two power ranking.
Power,
Yes,
but
please.
yeah, maybe we'll do a schoolyard pick with those. We'll see. Zach, thanks so much for coming on, dude.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thanks for having me. I could rant about Dune all day. So if we need to do Dune rant part two, I'll be here.
Dune Rant Part 2. Yeah, like, subscribe, leave a comment. What do you think of Dune? What do you think of Zach? Zach, your last name is so close to Dune. Like it's
Might change it.
Zach
It is
Dunn,
close.
Zach Dune. Yeah, like, subscribe, leave a review on iTunes as well if you could. Apparently, that's a big deal. So, Dune Part 2, go see it and let us know what you thought. Thanks, Zach.
May thy next chip and chatter.
Jeez.